Thanks, Ollie. It was really nice to hear about the biobank. Our last speaker is Carina Heller, who is a postdoctoral researcher at the Department of Psychiatry and Psychotherapy at Jena University Hospital, which is in a small town I just learned, close to Leipzig, where they do have a 70 MRI scanner. She'll tell more about that. She's also chair of the ENIGMA Neuroendocrinology Working Group. So welcome.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak about bridging gaps in women's health research, and especially thank you to Niels and the Open Science Special Interest Group for organizing this symposium. I'm speaking on behalf of the ENIGMA Neuroendocrinology Working Group. And first off, I have no financial or non-financial competing interests to declare. I only have funding. I'm funded by the Friedrich Schiller University Jena and by the German Research Foundation. And I wanted to start my talk with a short explanation of the distinction between sex and gender, because these terms are frequently used interchangeably, although they represent distinct concepts. So sex is based on biological characteristics such as anatomy, physiology, genetics, and the hormones a person was born with, and it's typically characterized as female and male. And gender, on the other hand, refers to a social and cultural construct that encompasses gender identity as well as social and cultural expectations about behavior and expressions that are associated with a specific sex role, and it's typically characterized as woman and man. However, we want to note that language around these terms is rapidly evolving, and we want to emphasize that neuroendocrinology is an important biological factor in the human experience that transcends any real or perceived binaries. And furthermore, I want to express and emphasize that although this talk is about women's health, that no sex or gender is inferior to the others. So let's move on to the sex and gender disparities in biomedical research. Most biomedical research advancements have historically centered on the male body, operating under the assumption that male anatomy and physiology represents the norm, while females have often been relegated to a secondary position. And following this, females and those who identify and present as women are subject to health inequities. And this is evidenced by higher rates of underdiagnosis, misdiagnosis, delayed diagnosis, and also increased susceptibility to adverse drug effects compared to the male counterparts. And these disparities emphasize the crucial importance of recognizing sex and gender-based disparities in the prevalence and also in the manifestation of various disorders. And despite concerted efforts in North America and also in Europe to include sex as a biological variable, but also to integrate sex and gender-based analysis into study designs, there are still enduring sex and gender-related inequalities present in both research and also in medical practice. Just to give you an example, it takes a woman approximately 8 years to get a diagnosis for endometriosis, or the symptoms for a heart attack in women are considered to be atypical, although women make half of the population in the world. But we are at a human brain imaging conference, so let's talk about neuroimaging. So here's another example. Since MRI came on the scene in the 1990s, more than 50,000 human brain imaging articles have been published. And out of these 50,000 human brain imaging articles, only half of 1% considered health factors specific to females and women. And representation is actually not the problem, because about 50% of people enrolled in neuroimaging studies listed on openneuro.org are actually women or female. So researchers are simply not choosing to study health factors specific to women, or they are not funded to do so. So let's look at funding. Online you can look up which projects are funded by the NIH in the United States. And so I did exactly that. I looked at 4 specific mental disorders. One of them is more prevalent in males, one of them is as prevalent in males as in females, and 2 are more prevalent in females. So let me start with the mental disorder that is more prevalent in males. Autism spectrum disorder is more prevalent in boys. Boys are nearly 4 times more likely to be diagnosed with autism than girls. And we can see that there are, at the moment, 2,004 active projects, which are funded with $1.1 billion total funding by the NIH. When we move to schizophrenia, we see that the numbers are a bit declining. Schizophrenia has a prevalence of 1% in the general population, and the sexes are equally affected. And we see that we have 1,573 active projects, which are funded with $919 million total funding. So let's move to a disorder that is more prevalent in females. Major depression disorder has a prevalence of 5% in adults, and females are twice as likely to be diagnosed with depression compared to men. And it should also be noted that 10% of pregnant women and women who have just given birth experience depression. And what we can see is that total funding is half of the funding compared to autism spectrum disorder, and that there are only 828 active projects left, which is also about half, or it's even less than half of the projects in autism spectrum disorder. And lastly, I looked at the funding numbers of premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which affects approximately 3 to 9% of females in their reproductive years. And we see that the numbers got really, really small. So there are 11 active projects left, which are funded with $12 million total funding by the NIH at the moment. So we can conclude that women's and female health is both understudied and underfunded. And in the light of these challenges, it is crucial to understand the role of sex hormones such as estrogens and progesterone, because these hormones undergo dynamic changes throughout the lifespan, and they exert a pivotal influence on brain development and function across various life stages. And these life stages encompass the prenatal period and puberty. They also encompass the reproductive years with the menstrual cycles and pregnancy, and of course, they also encompass menopause. And these hormonal fluctuations have been linked to mood disturbances in some individuals with a heightened risk of psychiatric symptoms at each of these transition points. So females face an increased risk of depression due to hormonal shifts during, for instance, the menstrual cycle, so they have an increased risk for the premenstrual dysphoric disorder, but they also have an increased risk for depression during and after pregnancy, which is called postpartum or peripartum depression, but they also have an increased risk for depression during and after menopause. And besides these endogenous hormonal fluctuations across the female lifespan, the intake of exogenous hormones in forms of, for example, hormonal contraception, but also hormone therapy in menopause might further shape the female brain and modulate the risk of mental health disorders. However, we want to note that neuroendocrinology is for everybody. Sex hormones such as estrogen and progesterone, but also testosterone, play pivotal roles in healthy brain development in all sexes and all genders. And while males experience diurnal changes in testosterone, females also experience peaks in testosterone across the menstrual cycle. And as little as we know about the ovarian hormones and how ovarian hormones affect the brain, we actually know even less about androgens. But it's important to note that all sexes and all genders have these hormones, and they're important for healthy brain development. And there's a lot of fantastic research going on. Here I just brought a few examples. So papers have been published on how the menstrual cycle affects the brain, but there are also papers out there how the oral contraceptives intake impact the brain in women. And these are really, really fantastic papers. However, previous studies predominantly rely on small data sets. And to extend our existing knowledge about the effects of hormones on the brain, a transition to larger and more diverse data sets is actually necessary. So we could aggregate, pool, and process existing data sets utilizing meta and mega-analysis and harmonization platforms. And in the ongoing pursuit of an enhanced comprehension of female health, researchers find themselves at a unique time in history with advances in technology and methods, but also with advantage and the cultivation of collaborative networks and consortia, we are now equipped with the capacity to provide rigorous and reproducible research into the biopsychological effects of sex hormones across the female lifespan. So this work can bridge the historical sex and gender data gap, relying on a robust foundation for the evidence-based sex and gender-sensitive advancements. And in this pursuit, team science initiatives such as the Ann Bowers Women's Brain Health Initiative, which is led by Emily Jacobs. She gave a terrific keynote speech last year, but also the ENIGMA Neuroendocrinology Working Group emerged as potent contributors. And now I would like to talk a bit about the ENIGMA Neuroendocrinology Working Group. Our group was launched last year in September, and it's a community-based effort to combine data from around the world to investigate the effects of hormones on the brain. And we are looking to pool already existing data, making current studies more diverse to increase, and also to increase sample sizes. So by uniting with researchers worldwide, we can collectively bridge gaps in our understanding of hormonal influences on the female brain and mental health. And this endeavors involves, first of all, coordinating multinational meta and mega-analysis to increase power, reproducibility, and generalizability by pooling data that is already available. We want to standardize new data collection and analysis in generating consensus guidelines and procedures for neuroendocrinology studies, for example, blood collection, because if blood and hormones are collected across different sites, it's kind of tricky to pool the data, and also if it was the hormones were collected with blood or with saliva, so we want to standardize this collection. But also we want to standardize collecting the history of menarche, but also the history of menstrual cycle regularity, but importantly also the history of menstrual cycle irregularity, and of course the history of contraception methods. We want to leverage advanced technologies, and lastly, of course, we want to set a standard for open data science and data sharing. And the ENIGMA Neuroendocrinology Working Group is organized into subgroups that are dedicated to key life stages covering the entire lifespan. So this spans the prenatal period to menopause. And now I would like to introduce you the subgroups. We have the puberty subgroup, which is led by Tim Silk and Nandita Vaijikumar. We have the subgroup early and middle adulthood with a specific interest in menstrual cycle phase and contraceptives. This group is led by Nicole Peterson, Zora Kikinis, and myself. We have the early and middle adulthood subgroup with a specific interest in pregnancy and parenting. This group is led by Susana Carmona and Magdalena Martinez Garcia. And lastly, we have the menopause and andropause subgroup, which is led by Claudia Bott. And while we are, of course, interested on how hormones impact the brain within these specific transition periods, we are also interested in a lifespan approach. So we want to know how hormones impact the brain across the whole lifespan. And the ENIGMA Neuroendocrinology Working Group extends an open call for international collaborators to join this effort. So in case you want to participate, you have an idea for a proposal, or you have data that you want to share, please let me know and please reach out to us. You are more than welcome to join. And more importantly, we also want to make our group and study populations more diverse, because most study populations are predominantly white, which Franco already mentioned. So if you are a researcher from Asia or Africa or anywhere else in the world and you want to participate, please reach out to us. We would really love for more people to join. And if you're more interested in the ENIGMA Neuroendocrinology Working Group, we recently published a commentary in Nature Mental Health, which you can access through this QR code, which I provided here. And now a bit of self-promotion. If you are interested how hormones affect the brain in a single subject, please come to visit my posters. So it's either go big with big data sets, or go very, very small and only scan one participant multiple times. So if you are interested in that, please visit me at my posters. I'm happy to chat both about the posters, but also about the ENIGMA Neuroendocrinology Working Group. And with that, thank you so much for your attention.